Two big momentum trades soaring again today. Bitcoin touching a fresh all-time high, topping $107,000 for the first time. Crypto proxy MicroStrategy have been up more than 7% after news late Friday that the stock will be added to the Nasdaq 100 next week. The gains fading in afternoon trade, but shares still up nearly 550% this year. MicroStrategy outperforming Bitcoin by almost 30% just since Donald Trump was elected president. So what is the outperformance signaling to you? Because it could be a broader market signal, Tim, or it could be Bitcoin specific?
It feels like allocation. Broader market, if you look at the NASDAQ, it's been outperforming not a little, but a lot, by 5% since Thanksgiving. If you look at the equal weighted, it's underperformed by almost 5% since Thanksgiving. So, and yet, again, the S&P is up 7.5% since the Fed. We've got a Fed meeting this week. In fact, we've got a bunch of other central banks this week. And I think the message is you've got central banks that are continuing to do their part. You've got seasonals, which we spent a ton of time on. But I think the dynamic around both CPI and then also look at that services flash PMI on U.S. services, which is the highest in 3 years for the biggest part of the U.S. economy. Now, it could be a noisy, lumpy data piece, but is ultimately the macro data has been supportive to a market where you've given equities every other ingredient. Labor markets are holding up. In fact, they're probably better than expected. I think we're rallying into year end, but it's notable that, again, the part that leads markets higher are truly the ones that are moving the market higher, not the breadth, but actually the same 10 stocks that are doing.
Yeah, Lori.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to see, right? Because everyone's been on the broadening bandwagon, and now all of a sudden we're seeing growth come roaring back. And I think when you look at Bitcoin, right, it's all tied up in the Trump trade, and there are a lot of new things that are happening, right, that it makes complete fundamental sense. But I would just add to what Tim said. I do think the economic fundamentals are solid, but there is also concerns about inflation creeping back in. Are we getting to the end of this Fed cutting cycle? And what I'm starting to hear from investors is the word stagflation again. And when you're in a stagflationary environment, the playbook has been to go back to these mega cap growth names. GDP is also sitting at around 2.1% for next year's forecast. That's typically also an environment when these, kind of mega cap growth areas do well. So it's a good macro, but not quite good enough to support that broadening.
Yeah, and the broadening thing, right? So let's just look at the equal weight S&P 500. It had this nice rally off the election. It's given back maybe almost a half of that over the last week and a half or so. If they want to pull up the RSP, the BKX has come in a little bit. So to Lori's point, you've seen this massive move into the growth thing. I mean, I think about the Fed. We have it on Wednesday. We have a meeting in January. It's a week after inauguration. Maybe we continue to rally into that. We do have Q4 earnings coming in around that period. I think that's going to be a really dicey time because if we do have a hawkish cut this week and we start to kind of price out a whole heck of a lot of cuts next year, I think the Fed funds futures, the CME, is pricing in like a less than 20% chance of a 25 basis point cut in January. So if we have this situation where rates stay bid, we just saw rates not going lower, yields stay bid after the rally that we've had. And if we think that growth is going to start to slow, that's not going to be a great setup for equities. And just the last point about Bitcoin and what we saw today with Broadcom up another 11% after it rallied 24% on Friday. It's gained about $300 billion in market cap in 2 trading days. Look at Tesla. It's gone from $250 the day of the election to about $450 now. There seems to be a bit of euphoria. And how I pull that all together, it feels a lot like early 2000. I'm not trying to say that we're about on the precipice of a crash, or late 2021 when we saw a lot of price action like this too. So the sentiment is unusually bullish right now, and it's getting more and more crowded, especially as we see some of the broader trades kind of coming to an end a little bit in the near term.